All right, so I'd like to talk to you about getting the most out of open source Ember code. Just a quick introduction, though track mentioned, I'm Katie Gengler. You may know me from Ember Observer or a number of add-ons that I've published. I also work for Code All Day. It's my own company with a partner, Michelle Santarsiero, and we do mostly Ember consulting. So I'd like to take a step back from the title of the talk and say, why do we use open source software? Which can be very similar to the question of why do we use Ember, because Ember is open source software. What are we getting out of it? Why is it better than buying software from somebody? And I don't think the answer is the obvious answer that it's free, very often free. And even though stuff that is free isn't necessarily free, but I'll get to that later. I think it's that we can see the source. But there's also so we can spend time on our domain rather than reinventing the wheel. When we get a large community of people working on software, it comes out with higher quality than if we just buy something from one small company or from a large company necessarily. And the community creates and maintains add-ons, so it frees us up to work on our application features and build more interesting things. And the source is available, so we can debug it, we can read it, we can learn from it, we can see how different JavaScript APIs are used, we can see how different Ember APIs are used, and I think this is an overlooked benefit of open source. And it's kind of a benefit that really drew me to open source, is that I wasn't learning much. Like proprietary software, you get a big book, maybe a big printout of a fax of the APIs you can use, but with open source, there's all sorts of examples. People blog about it. There's PRs you can read. So that's very nice. To get to what this talk is really about, it's about how you can use emberobserver.com, which I created, to get more out of Ember add-ons. Ember add-ons being a subset of free, mostly a subset of free open source software. And it aims to help users find add-ons to use and learn from. And let me tell you why I originally built it. I built it because I had been using emberaddons.com, which publishes a stream of add-ons as they are published. And I would look at every new add-on and mentally catalog when would I use this in the future. And I would look at the code and see what APIs they were using and see, like, maybe this gives me ideas for things I could do later on. And I've long had a rubric for evaluating open source software coming from the Ruby world and evaluating gems. And every time you choose a dependency, it's a liability. So there's a lot to weigh. And after a while, it was getting hard to keep in my head. There were a lot of add-ons. There's just more and more. And I could have just put it in a spreadsheet, but I'm a software developer, and code is my tool, as Sam said. So I decided to build an app. And my husband's also a programmer, so I was like, I want to build an app. And he's like, great, let's do it right away. And so we built an application, and we were inspired by prior art such as Ruby Toolbox, which in the Ruby world is something that categorizes and it didn't really have a score, but it had like metrics of how popular or how active an add-on a gem was. So taking a step back, what's an Ember add-on? Just a quick overview for those who may not know. You may use it and not even ever think about what is it actually. Add-ons provide reusable functionality to Ember applications. They're NPM packages with particular metadata and structure. Some add to Ember, some add to Ember CLI, some to both. Some do things completely unrelated to Ember, which is sometimes confusing. They're not necessarily open source. I mean, I met a lot of companies have their own add-ons, and that's a very great tool. But the ones we're concerned with are, and many, many are. So this is good and bad news. There are nearly 6,000 Ember add-ons published to NPM. And for good news, though, Ember Observer curates the add-ons lightly. Through a combination of automated and manual checks, we filter out add-ons that are incomplete or works in progress. And just to say what we actually filter out, we filter out add-ons that don't meet these criteria. You have to be able to see, at a minimum, what it should do, either through a descriptive name, a description, a README. We're very generous on this topic. It's intentionally published because I see a lot of, oops, I accidentally published all my company's private add-ons. That happens a lot, so I just quickly check them off and hide them. I've personally done that a couple times. Like sometimes you can publish an add-on that you're not really intending to share. You're just publishing it for convenience. Like if I published an Ember Observer style guide, probably no other site is going to ever want to use that add-on. But maybe if I had different apps, I would want to do that. And it doesn't explicitly say it's deprecated or work in progress. So some people say deprecated, work in progress right in the README, and then I'm like, well, probably nobody else is going to want to use this. So out of all those add-ons, Ember Observer lists me out 66% of them. Like so, 44%, I can't do math, 34% are being hidden. So what else does Ember Observer do? It also categorizes add-ons. And this is a manual process, so if something's not categorized right, just message me. There's over 70 categories now, including examples such as drag and drop, file upload, polyfills, experiments. So there's usually some way like you can look into these categories and find what you're looking, find an add-on to either play around with or for what particular purpose you're looking to fill. And in terms of curation, the last thing Ember Observer does is score add-ons through a combination of manual and automated tests. And this is just a breakdown of the score, just to remind everybody if they're not familiar. It's all documented on the site, but it's very easy to miss. The score is made up of a bunch of metrics or a bunch of tests that I think represent the topics on here, and the number on the left is the number of points allocated to there. So sustainability, it comes from the number of contributors being greater than 2. Popularity, whether or not it's in the top 10% of add-on downloads on NPM. Interest, whether it was in the top 10% of GitHub stars from the GitHub API. And that one gets a little tricky because not all add-ons necessarily have a repository URL set, and so you can't get that data necessarily. So some add-ons get excluded from that, maybe not intentionally, really. Being maintained, so that's having a release in the last 3 months and more than one commit in the last 3 months. And being open source, they get 2 points just automatically for that, being open source and not an empty add-on. These are likely going to be replaced by other metrics. I've been working on reworking the score to not be directly out of 10 and become something that can have many, many checks involved and some checks that don't necessarily apply to all add-ons. Try to do that in a fair way. And you get one for having meaningful tests, which is a manual check. And again, very generous with this. Like as long as you have a test that's not like the one that's generated by Ember CLI, slightly different, you get that point. I'd like to eventually replace that with something like code coverage and also a bit of a manual check. Another point for having CI to run those tests set up, also manual, because we found a lot of add-ons have CI set up, or have the badge, but it then leaks to something else. Yeah. One for having documentation, and that's also manual. And that one I don't really see how to automate too easily. Just that's checking that there's some description in the README at the very least, not necessarily having something like Ember CLI add-on docs, though that would be maybe a bonus point. So I'd like to briefly go through how I choose add-ons. And how I choose open source. This is mostly generally applicable. Every dependency, like as I said, is a liability, and I want to make sure that I choose something that is, not going to cause me pain or strife or have to rip out in a week. Generally want to choose that. So the first thing I do is look for add-ons that do what I need. So if I'm looking for a slider, I'm not going to look at build tools. Just seems obvious. Then I filter by score, and do I trust my own score is a great question. I do to some extent. Like basically, it's good to weed out I wouldn't, anything less than 5, I usually just generally try to look at everything above that unless there's no other options, then I look at those. And I eliminate unmaintained add-ons. So something, if I go and look at it and there hasn't been a commit for 2 years or the issues are piling up, I probably don't want to use that. But then I think this has to be looked at in the context of what project you're working on. If I'm working on a client app, I don't want to choose something that's unmaintained. But if I'm working on Ember Observer, it's a side project, and I say there's this checkbox add-on that does what it does, it works, and I can get some stuff done faster, I'll probably take it because I'm saving time now, and maybe I'll never have to replace the add-on, and if I do, whatever, I would have had to spend that time before anyway. But in a production app, that would be a lot more risky. And I also might use an experimental add-on, more like in a side project versus a production tool. Then I narrow the list to add-ons with licenses compatible with the project. This is something I think a lot of developers forget to look at. Depending on your use case, if you're commercial, they might have a license that's not compatible, and I think it's becoming more and more common. So you really have to look at the license file and make sure you're allowed to, you can use it for what you want to use it for. Then I start examining the API and code. I look at the documentation, I poke around the code. Does it seem like it really does what I need at this point? Does it look flexible? Does it follow best practices? Is it easy enough that I think I could take it over if I had to? Like, can I fork it if I need to? Is it so complicated I have no idea what's going on? Then I probably wouldn't want it. Is it bungling accessibility when that's crucial for your app? And if maybe those things are negatives that you could fix by PRing it, but maybe not, and maybe you want to move on. Then I look at the issues and PRs, see if any PRs have been accepted, see if there's major bugs that are deal breakers, just kind of generally look at the state of the project. And then I try a likely candidate, and sometimes you have to rinse and repeat there. Try a few things until you find the right one. And then I really think about it. So again, going back to the fact that you might have to take it over, I want to think about this dependency and see if I really want this to be in my application, and see if I think that the benefits outweigh the costs. So if something's more complicated or using private APIs, is this going to break my app when I go to upgrade Ember? Is it going to make it difficult to use other add-ons? Is it preclude whole categories of add-ons? I've seen that a couple times. I also look and see if there's maybe any newer alternatives, because sometimes add-ons move on. Sometimes it's not the easiest to see that an add-on has merged with another add-on and development is actually happening in a complete new repo. Often I try to find that and put it in a note on Ember Observer, but I don't always catch that because it's obviously something I would just have to happen to see in the README. And then you have to think about it in the context of your project, like I said. You need to think about what your project needs and whether or not it works for your particular scenario. If you're building a prototype, you can probably go with almost anything as long as it works. Right? But if I'm building something that is mission critical, I probably shouldn't choose an add-on with one maintainer that was released last week. And lastly, I try to be a good user. So after I choose an add-on, this is the next stage. I try to file bugs, descriptive bugs when I find them, preferably with reproductions. Try to help out if I misunderstand the documentation. I try to make a PR. You can try to reproduce other filed issues. And at this point, I'd like to move on to actually demoing Ember Observer, which I'm sorry if this is super bore for those of you that use it. But I found a lot of people don't realize how much is there. And I need to magically figure out. Oh, there's this other screen here. I need to unmirror. Sorry about this. Or mirror instead. Yes. Where's my other window? Haha. All right. And we're in business. All right, so starting off with Ember Observer, this is the main page. You have the ability to search for add-ons, a few different lists of add-ons, and the categories here. And so the first thing I'd like to do is look through these top add-ons, and these top add-ons are the top 100 add-ons by score and NPM downloads. And you can see the full list. Oh, good, internet's working. And then I can go and say I'll pick Ember CLI Mirage. Let's take a look at that add-on. And a lot of the info that you would find on NPM site itself is here as well. I had Ember install, quick to copy, the versions, the download count, GitHub link, some notes about that what it's changed from. This is ages ago. It was named Ember Pretenderify. I can probably remove that at this point. You'd normally see maintainers here. I wonder what's going on there. Open source, bug. And you can see the version history interspersed with the Ember releases. So you can see quickly see if an add-on has updated since the latest Ember versions or since a particular Ember version you care about. And going down here, we have the GitHub stats, the categories, the review, and these are the manual checks. And so everything that's automated is rolled up into the score. You can hit explain this and see the different points it is getting or not getting. And we also have the README here. And for anybody who's maintaining an add-on, we have the badge, and you can copy that right into your README. And I'd like to point out something very important on this page. It's the suggest a correction link. It goes to a form that emails me and the other people that work on Ember Observer. And you can, if you see anything that's incorrect here, the NPM API is not the most reliable. We often have bugs around the GitHub API. And also, it's very easy to miss a manual check. So jumping from there, I'd like to show the category page. And so I'm going to go to mocking fixtures and factories. And you can see here what's at the top of the, I just found another bug. Where's Ember CLI Mirage? Oh, no, there it is. OK. Yeah. So you can see the top add-ons in this category from here, and you can sort by name and updated. And from here, I'd like to go to demo back on the main page. And I'd like to demo here on the main page. You can search, and so you can search for. That's not what I want to search. You can search for modal and see the results by categories, by add-ons. And if there were matching maintainers, they'd be there as well. But then if you want to search a little bit more, you can search READMEs as well. And so I've searched here for feature flags. I can see category add-ons. But if I search READMEs, it'll show results in READMEs. And so this is useful if Ember Observer has kind of failed and it's not gotten something categorized correctly, or you're looking for something, maybe something that doesn't describe it the same exact way as I've described it in categories. And so you can search the READMEs and try to find everything that does something related to feature flags or any other query. And that's very useful too. It's a full text search. And this is just the set of Ember add-ons. And so that's useful compared to GitHub search, because on GitHub you would get everything. And Ember Observer also has open search enabled. So if you set that up, you can just search Ember Observer right from your browser, or you can set that up in your editor as well, I think, to link to add-ons. And maybe no internets. Let's see. Am I missing something? Sorry about this. There we go. The next thing I'd like to demonstrate is code search. Code search was something I don't remember when we added, but Michelle did most of the work on this, so she gets all the credit. Yes. And so code search I find very good for learning from add-ons. And so you might want to see how, say, computed works. So I search for computed. It's going to take a little while. There we go. And you can sort by score. So you can see how the nicest add-ons use computed, or theoretically nicest. But now I'm getting all these imports, and that's not very useful. So let me search for computed parenthesis. And then you'll get this, but then maybe I only want to see computeds with a dependent key. And so then I can use a regex search here, and I can do and quote or quote. What did I do? And so now you can see add-ons that have computeds with dependent keys, and you can kind of try to learn how that works through looking at the examples and usages. And then, oops, I opened these all up just in case nothing was working. Another thing I'd like to search for is included, which is a Ember CLI hook. But as you imagine, this can be used a lot of places, and the word included is not exactly uncommon. So you can filter by file path And so in Ember CLI, this would often be in index.js. So you can filter by file path here and see only the ones that are in index.js. And then you can, again, try to learn how this works. So I use this a lot when I'm working. If I see an API that I don't know, and I just try to see other examples, or I'm looking at an add-on, and I'm like, I've never seen anything do this before. Let me see if other add-ons do it and see if the kind of like the safety of the herd, like everybody else is doing this. Oh, good, it's okay. Or this is really weird. Is it really weird like it's going to be the new thing? Or is it really weird like it's a really old thing? Or this person has no clue? And another part of Ember Observer I'd like to demo that very few people know about is the Canary test result dashboard. So every night, Ember Observer runs Ember try scenarios against the top 200 add-ons. And this is like a canary in the coal mine for runs against Ember Canary to see if the builds start failing against Canary for a good portion of add-ons. It's kind of a signifier that maybe something went wrong. And we did catch something recently that was kind of satisfying after a long time. So a lot will fail or error because of things that are specific to an add-on and that we don't have quite set up. And eventually we fix them one by one, but it's a little whack-a-mole. But it's kind of, I think it's neat. And we have the same thing for beta, but I don't know what the URL is. And lastly, I'd like to demonstrate this new thing. I haven't actually deployed it yet. I was going to deploy it right before this talk, and that seemed like a bad idea when I thought about it a second time. So this is just running on my local host here. This is another list that I've added, and it's the add-ons with incorrect or missing repository URLs. So in package.json for the latest version, there's either no repository URL, or it's pointing to something incorrect, like it's pointing to ember.js or just something completely unrelated. And so I've made this list. I'm going to make this list public because I'd like to kind of crowdsource fixing those repo URLs. For a long time, I was making PRs for it, and I gave up. A lot of times, they weren't even accepted. But I think that if we get a lot of people trying to fix these, some of these are probably really good add-ons that we're not getting to look at or getting to use because we can't find them. And that's all I've got. Thanks. Anybody questions?
Yeah, Katie!